Hello, everybody. It is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome to another video over here on That's Comical. And of course, if you happen to be watching and it's Wednesday, happy new comic book day. And I am very excited today because I am not only talking about a new must be read, but I'm very excited to have a guest on again. This is the second guest that I have brought onto the show, so I am hoping that my colleagues on the team are realizing, let's start bringing some more people in to share our love of comics and manga and films and all of these great things that make up this amazing world. And I've got a really good friend today. It's Christa from the Bookish Porcupine. Christa, thank you so much for joining me this evening.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm very excited about it. I'm very excited about Saga. So I'm just really glad that you invited me to come talk about my favorite comic.
Yeah, and of course, she just officially said it, everybody. This is a must-be read about the Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples comic phenomenon that is Saga. And why are we classifying it as a must-be read? Because of the fact that it was announced earlier in 2021 that Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples were going to be coming back after a 3.5-year hiatus to finally continue this story that so many people have just been enveloped in regards to these characters and this world. And now that I am a proud reader of all 9 volumes, I will definitely say that I am very much in there with everybody who has been ranting and raving about this comics. I'm hoping that each and every one of you are going to enjoy this, especially if you're Saga fans. So don't forget to leave a like as well as a comment. We would love to talk to you. And if you want to see what else is going on the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest content. So Christa, your beginnings with Saga, when did you first discover it and what did you think about it when you first picked it up?
Okay, so I'm actually not sure when I first came about it. I'm pretty sure volume 4 had either just come out or was about to come out because everyone was really talking about it on BookTube. And I remember a couple people reading volume 1 and it got me really interested in it. I hadn't really dabbled so much in graphic novels yet at this point. So I think also with Saga, one of the reasons why it's dear to my heart is because it's like the first comic series that I really got into. So it really helped drive this passion later on. But also Saga Volume 1 was the very first volume or of anything that I got from a subscriber for my birthday.
Oh.
So that also was just like a big thing for me because I'd never gotten anything from anyone before. And I actually got the first volume from one of my viewers. And that's how I started reading it. And then I just, continued on. I was actually so dedicated that I picked up like issue by issue by issue and then got the volumes as well. So I have been in this for a really long time and I'm very excited.
Oh, it definitely sounds like you are. I mean, there's a lot for me to say about Saga, also just because of the fact that it was very similar to you. I first heard about booktubers raving about this specific graphic novel and another one that I also finally read, and that was Alex and Ada. I did a recording, a must-be read with my colleague Shay over here on That's Comical. And everybody was always saying, Saga this and Saga that. Everyone was just talking about how amazing this comic book was, but it never really grabbed me. And I just didn't understand what it was about that book. But if someone would have just said one little fact about this book, and I managed to find it myself, if someone would have just told me that this was an Image comic book, I probably would have went and hunted this down much quicker because as a comic book collector, as a kid in the 1990s, when Image Comics officially showed up, this was my childhood. These were characters that I got in on the ground up with, like Wildcats and Shadowhawk and Spawn and Youngblood and the Max. Like, these are all characters from a comic book company that I love because it also had the writers and the artists that I loved. But I never knew anything about this specific comic book along with the comic book like Alex and Ada. And what's also so interesting is I didn't even know about the importance that Saga played in Image Comics, because this book came out in the 2000s at a time where Image almost disbanded and went under. But if it wasn't for these guys finding a guy named Robert Kirkman, who would eventually revamp Image Comics and give us The Walking Dead and Invincible, and then Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples would just be the next duo that would show up and just hit it out of the park and just bring Image back in an amazing way, I would have probably found these floppies, because I got back into collecting comics back in 2019, and I'm so glad that I did. But oh my God, to get your hands on the first issue of Saga, you got to pay over $2,000 to get one. That's just how valuable. Yeah. It's also because of the fact that when these comics were coming out, one of the biggest faults that the comic industry had in the 1990s was they were overproducing. And there was a huge speculator market where people believed that if they bought like boxes of #1s of a certain comic, they'd be able to put a down payment on a house or fund a kid's college fund. And because there was so much mass production, the comic speculation market bubble burst, and all these comics that came out in the early 1990s are now almost worthless. They're starting to go back up in value now because there's so many other reasons as to why. But when Saga was coming out, they were doing low print runs. So there aren't that many copies floating around out there. So if you were fortunate enough to get in on the ground up and get in early, you are now holding on to some very valuable comic books just because of the scarcity. So that's why the value is so high. The further on you go in the story, the volumes are not as hard to find, but I am not anticipating issue number 55 next week to be extremely valuable. But I purposely sort of like feel like, to have the comeback issue would be a cool thing to have. And, if my comic store decided, or if I went to New York Comic Con and Brandon K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples were there signing comics, I would totally bring my copy of issue 55 just to have it signed. And more importantly, just say thank you very much for a really cool story. So that's basically it. I said to myself, with the big comeback coming, I think it's time to read this book. So luckily, it was easy to get my hands on all 9 volumes, and the minute I stepped into this world, I just couldn't put it down. I just kept reading and reading and reading.
Yeah, it's definitely an addictive story, especially with, I think they specifically do really good cliffhangers on a lot of their issues, as well as volumes, because for me, I read an issue for a really long time. So having to like sit there and wait for the next issue was so hard. But then also when the volumes came out, then everyone was kind of experiencing what I was experiencing with the cliffhangers for volume to volume. And of course, volume 9 ends off not unnecessarily. It's cliffhanger, but you definitely want to keep reading. You want to know
We're
what's
gonna
going
get
on.
into that. We are definitely gonna get into that. But I agree with you, because I actually bought volume 1 with a little bit of gift money, just because I said to myself, you know what? If I don't like it, then it's not going to be any sweat off my back. But you're absolutely right. You get to the end of issue number 6, I believe it is, which is at the end of volume 1, and you see that last page, and you're like, wow, I think I actually want to continue reading.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what makes a comic book so great. It's if you can't really hook those readers, and it's not just that. You also got to do it in a very particular way. Like, don't just get someone to pick up a comic just so they can get to the cliffhanger. Give them a good story to chew on, so that when they get to that cliffhanger, it's all the more special. I mean, if dare I say it, it seems to me right now that's the main reason why people are going to see the newest MCU film, because they just want to see that post-credits scene right now. But I will definitely say that I'm not one of those people, even though I do enjoy them. But I'm glad to know that I enjoy those movies straight through. But that's really what it's all about. So what if someone has never picked up Saga but is interested in reading it? what do you think is the best way to describe it in the least amount of words possible?
Okay. Let's see. So it's a story about, I don't know if this is a least amount of words, but it's a story about two people from warring, well, it's a planet and a moon, and they end up falling in love and having a child. And obviously, that's very wrong. And a lot of people have a lot of stakes in this about the idea of this abomination happening. And so then lots of people get involved, and it kind of just goes from there. You know, always on the run ever since they fell in love, essentially. So it's just all of the shenanigans.
That's very quick to explain. That's definitely the way that I would do it. It really is about, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's about star-crossed lovers in a war-torn time between a planet and a moon. And it's the story of Marco and Alana. They have a baby named Hazel. And apparently there are a lot of people that are scared. Some people are hopeful, but apparently these two are basically trying to avoid any kind of authority that is trying to find them. And you've got everyone from leaders to bounty hunters trying to find them. And not just that, even family members and friends are trying to find them as well. That's what makes it so interesting. I think the way that I was described to it was someone said to me, like, it's a really interesting fantasy romance. And they basically said, if you do not have any issues with some very graphic images, you're going to be completely fine with it. And yeah, and one of the few things that I will definitely say, because I've been saying this a lot when it comes to stories that especially are coming out now, even with some of the most well-known names in comic books, comics are definitely not being written with a child in mind. There are a lot of stories out there that are for very mature readers because they're trying to reach out to the people who have been collecting comics since like the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. I say, like, whenever I go on Wednesdays to my comic store to pick up my new issues, I don't see any children coming in. You know, so and sometimes I will see parents coming in and they will ask, do you sell this, this, and this? And it's never a comic book. So that's one of the few things that I see. But one of the few things that I will definitely do is shout out one of my colleagues here, Andy, because he had started reading this, but he realized it might not be the right thing to read in public because, you know, you're reading a great story with amazing characters, incredible world building, and you're excited to see what happens next. Then you turn the page and you're like, oh wow, this guy's got a dick in his mouth, you know? So like that's definitely bold. I give Brian Vaughan and Fiona Staples a lot of credit for especially doing something that has never been done before in the nature that it's done. But if I'm going to be honest with you, that's the least of my thoughts when I read this book. I mean, yes, when I turn those pages and I see those types of things, I'm like, okay, we're going there. That's interesting. But there's a story here. That's the most important thing.
Right. And I think, I know some of the, especially on the booktube front, a lot of people were kind of criticizing it for its graphic material, saying that it's there for shock value and stuff. And I do understand where they were coming from, but there is a part to it that, I mean, it's there for a reason, you know? And they do things this certain way because they are trying to tell the story. And honestly, it's the same thing as if you were reading this, if it was like in novel form, it would just be describing it rather than showing it, which I know is like the big difference. But it's still, there's so many things to love about it. Aside from that, there's like all this character development and stories that are just really being shown in an interesting way that's, again, like you said, never been done before. And I've seen a lot of comics kind of step towards this side of like graphic material since then. So I think it's definitely an interesting thing that they did.
Well, what's interesting is when you take a look at the history of comic books, there was a time when you were really forbidden to do that. I don't know if you know anything about the well-known Comics Code, which is no longer something that exists right now. So basically, the Comics Code was introduced in the 1950s. It was a time when the superheroes had already been introduced, with Superman and Batman and Captain America and all these guys like in the 30s and 40s. But after World War II, the reader really wasn't interested in superheroes. So these comic companies would do a lot of pulp comics, a lot of detective stories, a lot of horror comics, and they were very graphic in nature. A lot of them had things like lots of blood, dismembered heads, people getting shot or stabbed or something like that. So the parents didn't like it, and they basically started saying, there were burnings in the streets. I'm not kidding, in the United States. So they decided to make the Comics Authority Code, which basically said you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, and one of the things that they definitely were not allowed to do was show nudity. But it wasn't until the 1980s where a well-known name, Alan Moore, made a certain comic book. You've probably heard this one, my friend, Watchmen. A lot of people know that one. And he drew a lot of male nudity. And the reason why he got away with it was because it said no naked women. So he completely showed them that there were so many flaws in what their rules were. And in the 80s, it was when people were starting to write a lot more that was not necessarily family friendly or said campy, and really go back to the darkness and go back to the really rough and gritty roots of comics. We had great stories like The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, just to name a few. But it was even in earlier portions of the 80s with a guy named Chris Claremont who was writing the X-Men, and he wrote the Dark Phoenix saga and said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to kill a character off. A character that everybody loves. They did the same thing in DC Comics in 1988 by killing off Robin in A Death in the Family, an amazing Batman story. Highly recommend. So in the mid-2000s, possibly the 2010s, the Comics Code was officially removed. It was definitely it was definitely done before Saga came out. So now there's a lot of liberty. And what's very interesting is because said liberties are now in play, there's a lot of comics that are coming out that are really more so for adults. They're going back to those pulp stories, those horror comics, and they're extremely popular right now. So yeah, I think that Saga was definitely, one that took advantage of what was now officially offered to the writers and the artists, and they just ran with it in a very positive way because clearly, regardless of what they've done, Saga has made an impact. I just find it funny how I wouldn't be surprised if the people that are criticizing the graphic nature of Saga, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people are reading ACOTAR and the rest of its novels like 20, 30 times,
Yeah, see, and that's one of my things that I argue with is that, like, it'd be the same subject matter in novel form, just all written out and described to you instead. And so it's kind of a weird thing to like say, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I truly love as well, besides the story is extremely engaging. It's absolutely it's a story that really sucks you in. And that's what I really love about it. I also really like the way that the story is portrayed in the written word. I love the way that it's Hazel telling the story, and I like that the way that she's telling the story is her words are not portrayed in a well-known thought bubble. It's literally stuff that is written like on the side panels, like in a completely open space. And I love that. I'm personally still trying to figure out when she's telling this story. That I'm wondering is, will this be revealed at the end of this story?
I hope so. I hope that we get to see like how old she is or whatever she's doing with her life. She's mentioned a couple of times like kind of like where she is now or like how old she is. So we have approximation, but it'd be nice to see her like fully grown, living her best life,
Yeah, absolutely. I just love the fact, that's another thing I love about this book. I love that they are also aging the characters. I love that at the beginning of the story, the baby is literally born right in front of your face. That is not something that they shied away from. And I just love the fact that as of now, she's got to be, oh, geez, at the end of volume 9, I think she's somewhere between like 5 and 7, maybe?
I think she's something
She's
like that because
definitely younger than 10.
one of the other characters is 10, and I think I remember she was mentioning she was like 6 or 7 at one point. So I'm assuming she's probably 7, 8ish maybe now.
Yeah. What are some of the highlights of this book? Like, what are the characters that you really connected with in this story?
I have a huge passion for Goose, spelled Chu with 2 dots over it, S. He is by far my favorite character. He's a cute fuzzy seal. Like, how could you not love him?
Well, I see him right over there on your shelf, by the way.
Yes.
I actually helped you get him. I helped you get him.
Yes, Goose is definitely one of my favorite characters. Just because he's not in a lot of the comics. He's not a super important character. He's a background character. But he just has a lot of character to him. Which, I mean, the whole volume, all of the series is full of characters that are so colorful and fleshed out. And Goose, I think, portrays that immensely because he is just a shepherd when you see him, and you kind of learn a little bit more about his personality and his loyalties, and a little bit about his species too. But another character that I really like is Marco, the father. I like a lot of what he's going through. He has a lot of ties to the war, as this is obviously a wartime story. And he's definitely dealing with a lot with his family history, but also trying to make this new family and what it means to him. And at the beginning of the first volume, he mentions that he doesn't want to be violent anymore. He wants to be just keeping the peace, and he really struggles with that throughout this whole series. And I really love the reasons for that and how they become introduced, and the conflicts in him, I think, are just so amazing that you just can't help feel for him.
Yeah, he's definitely a very interesting character. I mean, I think what's really amazing about him is just, even though he's not always with them, he's extremely dedicated to his family because he's taking those risks of being separated with them for the purposes of making sure that eventually they will be safe. And that's an admirable quality, I will definitely say. I will also say that Alana has some great moments, but there were a lot of times in the books where I really did not like her character. I think it was in volume 4 where she was playing like a soap star, and then she started getting addicted to some weird drugs. Like, I was saying to myself, why did she go in this direction? Like, she knows she's got a daughter. She loves her daughter. She loves her husband. How did she start to fall off of the wagon? Like, what caused this? It also like was very strange. Like, because I'm always someone who finds the plot idea of hiding in plain sight to be very interesting. But I'm saying to myself, this is just really something that shouldn't be happening, especially when you are really finding ways to make yourself truly noticed in a bad way.
Yeah, and I mean, this whole series, I mean, like you said, there's at one point where you don't like Alana, but you could say that about so many other characters. They all don't always make the right choice, and that's what's interesting to see. I mean, you could tell with Prince Robot, Robot Prince number 4, right?
Well, Prince Robot 4 is one of my favorite characters, and I think the reason why I like him so much is just because of what Vaughn and Staples did with him, because I really thought that he was just going to be the true unadulterated baddie throughout the entire story, but he's gone from bad guy to sympathetic fallen villain to anti-hero to full-on hero. Like, he's become one of the most intriguing characters in comics, as far as I'm concerned, because it's been 9 volumes and I still have no idea what the hell he is in terms of what is his main purpose in this story going to be.
Right. And so, yeah, but he definitely has like a rocky road. He's definitely not perfect. He definitely doesn't start out that way, at least. And I just think that you could say that about all the characters, though. And that's one of the reasons why I love the characters the most in the series, besides the plot. Like, I think the characters really stuck with me.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I find that you could tell that Brian Vaughan and Fiona Staples had the most fun with Prince Robot 4, just because of all those funny. He also, I think, is the comic relief of the books, because I love how creative they get with his monitor head, because that's the thing I love so much about him. It's a guy with a monitor for a head. So I thought one of the most hilarious things, like, I literally, no one was in the house at the time. My wife, I believe, was in school at the time teaching, but I love the fact that there was a point in time where he was knocked out unconscious and you see the blue screen of death on his face, and I'm like, oh my God, that is one of the most ingenious things I've ever seen before. That was absolutely brilliant. And there's so many other dimensions. Like, he has a wife, and yet he goes to Sextillion and has his crazy romps. And then he has a son, and then his son is kidnapped by a commoner. And I love also the creativity, like the commoners have less expensive looking monitors on their heads. And I love the fact that his father is a big screen TV. Like, the creativity of this world is beautiful. And I think that's one of the main reasons why I also love this character, is just because of all the creativity that is put into him. But another one of my favorite characters is the Will. You know, like, here was a guy, again, he was a bounty hunter, but at the very beginning, even when you were introduced to him, you knew that he was probably not going to be another true villain, because you could tell that he had a heart when he rescued, I believe it was Sophia, from sex slavery. I believe that's what was her name, Sophia, or could be, am I wrong?
Her name is Sophie.
Sophie, right. Okay, I was close.
Yeah, you were close.
He ended up seeing a lot of death in regards to people that he loved. I also found it really funny how he ended up having a little bit of an adventure with Marco's ex-girlfriend. Very, very interesting how they actually put her in there. And I also just appreciated, again, the artwork that goes into him. Like, there was a point in time where he's really, really troubled. So he's grown a beard, he's put on a couple of extra pounds, and he's seeing all of these weird visions of people that he knows and loves that he's lost. And eventually he ends up doing some of the most pivotal things towards the end of the 9 volumes that we currently have. So in the end, a character that could have really gone anywhere in this story ended up being a very crucial part of the whole story.
I didn't expect him to be a super important character when I first read the series, especially since there's a point where he kind of like gives up on chasing after Marco and Alana. And so I thought that was going to be his like exit from the series. I didn't think he was going to be introduced that much anymore. But he's definitely a character that comes around a lot. And like you said, definitely does some things in volume 9 that need to be explained. Just letting everyone know, because I am very upset with the authors. But I'm excited to see where his story goes, because it's definitely not done yet. You can tell that he still has some character development left.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've only scratched, it's funny to believe that we're 54 issues in, waiting for issue 55, and we've only literally scratched the surface, because as far as I can tell, they've basically been saying that once we start with issue 55, then we're going to basically take issue 55 and go to the very end of the series. So this is the second half, but I mean, I don't know how long the second act is going to be. I would not be surprised if they want to make it go to an even 100. Maybe they'll take it to issue 125. Maybe they'll take it to issue 150. But the fact that they've had 3.5 years to really plan what they're going to do with this, because again, we'll get to that cliffhanger ending of the first act before we finish the video. That's a certainty. But, you know, after doing what you did, you know, you better have taken full advantage of those 3.5 years that you have just least recently had for yourselves to make sure that we get an amazing second act. There's a lot of other interesting things that I find that are what really sucks the reader in. I really appreciate, and maybe you can help me on this one, how the role of journalism and books take in this story, because it goes back to that one smut novel that Alana is obsessed with, to the point where in the second volume they actually hide with the author of the book. What is it about this author that seemed to connect with so many people? Because at one point in time, Marco's mother thought this guy was a complete dirty birdie, and she ends up becoming such a fan of those books herself. So what is it about this author what exactly is the driving point of this specific element of the story? Maybe you can help me out on that one.
Okay, so Oswald D. Heist, that's the author's name. So he wrote a smut novel. He also wrote a whole bunch of other romance novels in this world. We do know that he's not actually well known for it. The book that Alana is obsessed with actually went out of print because it just wasn't that popular. So it's definitely interesting to know, like, why this one out of all of his works, if he's so popular, like why does she love this one? But it's because it's sort of a symbolism for love and peace. He notes that it's not actually supposed to be what it is. There's a lot more to the story. And Prince Robot, he actually goes to hunt down Oswald D. Heist, and he's like, you know, actually like coming to him and saying like, your story's not offensive, but like it's obviously not what it is. And he pretends to be like, no, it's just a romance novel. It's like a stupid romance novel that I wrote for a paycheck. And Prince Robot's like, no, clearly not. It's something very important. And you find out just how important it is throughout the whole series, because there's a point where when Alana's at the soap opera thing, she actually quotes one of the lines. Several of the characters bring up lines from the novel that they've all been at one point or another essentially forced to read. And you just see that it's a love story. It's about peace, harmony. It's kind of just showing in everyone's face that this war's stupid and what they're doing is stupid, because a lot of them are hunting down Marco and Alana, or they are, you know, dealing with their own racist beliefs about this relationship. They don't like it. They have their own prejudices, and it's showing them in book form, hey, you need to stop what you're thinking and kind of reassess it and maybe change your opinion. And it does that so slyly. And same thing with the journalism aspect to it. It starts off with these two journalists. I
only know that the blue one's name is Upshur. I can never remember the green one.
Yeah, I don't remember their names.
But I like them, because I think what's very interesting about those two guys is the fact that their kind of journalism is not necessarily something that is appreciated. I believe it's also somewhat against the laws, and yet they still go out of their ways and they risk their lives to actually uncover the story. But the funny thing is, I think what's really interesting is every person, maybe minus one or two, that comes in contact with Marco and Alana, their whole perspective of them actually changes. And I think that that is something that's also very important about this specific story. This story really does create a lot of symbolism for what has been happening in the world for the last half decade, maybe even full decade, because It's also something that really sympathizes with a lot of people that want to see representation in a novel, because there's a lot of different kinds of sexuality in here. I mean, there is same-sex, there's bisexuality, there's transgender people to a certain degree in this book as well. But the most important thing is, because of the fact that the story is so good, it's not necessarily something that you're truly paying attention to. I think that when it's visual, you see it, so you know that it's happening, but it's something that you just sort of brush off, because I know there's so many people that, are either extremely for it or extremely against it. This culture war is just driving me out of my mind at this point in time. But because of the fact that there's an amazing story within the pages of this comic, all of that stuff is just completely thrown out the window. But at the same time, you can definitely tell that these two creators are trying to make a point. And I believe that what that point is, if there's something out there that you truly don't understand, but it's something that is really, you feel you need to get an understanding of it for yourself, you've got to hunt it down. You got to see it with your own eyes. You can't see it through another person's eyes. You can't see it through another person's words. I feel that that's the main importance of this specific couple's relationship, because like I said, every time, whether it's someone that's trying to kill them, or if it's someone that's trying to uncover a story, they finally come in contact with these two people and their daughter, and they're like, something, these people may not be exactly what we think they are.
Every character, like you said, that comes in contact with Alana and Marco have to change their opinion, or not have to, but they do end up changing their opinions, at least about some things, not necessarily about them specifically, but their world point of views and stuff. Prince Robot 4 is a great example of that. He definitely goes through a lot of changes interacting with Alana and Marco and the crew that they end up getting, everyone that joins along. So I think I love the story. Like I said, I just keep saying that, but
Yeah. There is another interesting thing that Brian Vaughan and Fiona Staples do, and this is where we will officially try and start to say a couple things about the story and yet not try and spoil, but they definitely know how to not only engage the reader, but they also really know how to catch the reader off guard and do something completely out of left field. Like, I will personally say that every single time I saw one of those big twists, I honestly never saw it coming. Like, there was literally, I had a lot of whoa moments. I was like, wow, they actually did go there. Like, I still, to this day, I still find the fact that scene, and this is a spoiler, but then again, this is a comic that's been around. I still can't get over the fact that there was that one scene where Prince Robot 4 got decapitated. I was like, whoa, that was pretty crazy. Like, I did not anticipate that. I didn't know if anybody actually had it in them to actually do that, but it happened.
Yeah, and I think with the idea of all of this being said around the war, I mean, not everyone lives obviously through war, and sometimes it's not through war, it's through the side things that are happening because of the war. And so this story really shows that, where, like I said, not everyone lives, and some people die just because they end up being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some people die because of misunderstandings, and everyone has skin in the game. I mean, you find out like later on in issues or on volume, I think 9, I'm not sure if she's in 8, but the mole lady, whatever her name is,
yes,
or whatever. So you wouldn't know this if you haven't read them, but she's the fiance of some mole creature that we met very early on in the story, and she is seeking revenge. And so it's just kind of, everyone just comes back around full circle.
Yeah. Except, unfortunately, we haven't seen the return of Isabel.
Isabel the ghost?
Yes. I loved Isabel. She is such a
Yeah.
great character, and she was like, because who we haven't really talked about yet. We haven't talked about Hazel.
Yeah.
Hazel's a
No.
great I think that Hazel is a fantastic character because, you know, one of the few things that I will definitely say is there are so many comic writers out there that do not know how to write the innocence of a child. And my God, Staples and Vaughn nail children. They do it beautifully.
Yeah, I love everything that they do with Hazel's character. I love that there's also a difference between her narrations when we know that she's older and then also how she's portrayed as a young one, because she's not going, like, you can tell that it's the same person but from two different timelines of age groups. So I think that that's really smart of them. And I also love how not only do they show like her innocence, but they also show her understandings of war, because obviously she's been through a lot. She's been on the run her whole entire life, and so even when people tell her to look away or close her eyes or whatever, she's asking really smart questions throughout the series, even if she doesn't know the full extent of why she's asking them. And I think it's just so cute. Like, I love the innocence of it, but I love that there's this deeper understanding of things that are going on, and she definitely has the courage to ask her parents certain things and other people certain questions that aren't also necessarily correct or polite to ask people, but because she's a child, she kind of gets away with it because she's a child, she doesn't know any better, and especially being shown war her whole life, she also doesn't exactly know the rules of how to talk to strangers or family members and stuff. So
And yet there are a lot of heavy things that take place, and yet she still manages to keep a composure and just miraculously manages to go on. I mean, I think that one of my most heartbreaking moments in this story was when, due to some serious conflict, Alana ended up having a miscarriage because there was going to be a second child, and that broke my heart because, like, first of all, I didn't even know that there was a point in the time where there was a second child on the way, and knowing that we unfortunately were never going to see it, and to the point where there was a part of the story where Hazel was actually seeing a ghost of a possible brother. That was a very interesting way of seeing how someone like Hazel was coping with this idea.
yeah, I think it was just it's definitely heartbreaking, but she does a really good job of coping with it and stuff. I mean, I think her mom at one point said that she's always bounced back really easily, and she's dealt with these hard situations in a really mature way, I think is the best way to say it.
Yeah, so we then get to the last page of issue number 54. And I don't know about you, but I would probably say that that may have been one of the most predictable moments, because I was saying to myself, okay, so these two people went on hiatus, and a hiatus that was apparently supposed to only last 2 years, but obviously I would guess because of COVID, they had to wait a little bit longer. But I am pretty sure that I believe that these two people have a plan. I believe that they were anticipating this hiatus, and they were basically saying, what can we possibly do to end this first act in a way that we know that when we finally come back from our hiatus, that these faithful readers are going to come back to this book, because a lot of people say that the best way to break a habit is to prevent someone from having access to said habit. Because comic books, for example, is a great way to explain that, because there was a point in the early portion of the pandemic where all the companies basically had to tell their readers that we all are being distributed by one company and they are officially not shipping our books. So we didn't know how long it was going to be until we all were able to get comic books again. So what I'm basically going with is, if you give that person 2 weeks of no access to comic books, there's a possibility that that person is not going to want to go back to the store and pick up a comic book again. So we're talking about 3.5 years since Saga issue number 54. I don't think you could have asked for a more perfect way to keep your readers latched on. They, once again, a stroke of genius, probably not something that people wanted, but we got it. It's there. And look, I read this 9-volume set. I read volume 9 about 3 weeks ago, and I definitely am still very excited to see what the next step is.
Yeah, it's so hard to imagine where they're gonna go from this. I do know that in an interview they said that this is pretty much the halfway point. So it's like, this is halfway, and what else do we have to see through? Because obviously in that issue some very important characters died. So it's like, I don't know, some part of me knows that this is obviously the best way to get people back into Saga, to be like, okay, well, what happens now? But also I'm not sure. You said that they had a plan. I believe in them, but I'm also feeling like maybe they backed themselves into a corner at some point because of the last issue. I don't know. I just feel like,
you could be right. You could be right. Again, we don't know because we're not in the room with them.
right, and I think that might have been why they've taken a longer time. Obviously, it could have been COVID, or just wanting to plan through more of what they were doing. But that's how I always felt. So it's just kind of, I don't know. I'm anticipating it, but I'm also very hesitant about it because I'm just concerned of where the story's going to go. But obviously, I should have faith. So hoping.
I mean, I will basically say that I am already looking. I have looked at the cover of issue number 55 numerous times, and I'm just saying to myself, when is this scene taking place? Like, I'm gonna guess that we have gone a little further into the future. I'm sure we'll get a backstory as to understand where we were from point A to point B, but if you've seen the cover of issue number 55,
I have not.
Well, all right. Well, look, this is going to be on the show. Here it is.
Okay.
So as far as I'm concerned, I am seeing characters that I recognize,
Right.
and one that I don't. And
Right.
I will definitely say that if this one over here is Hazel, she definitely doesn't look like she is the same age that she was in the last issue.
Yeah, I think I have seen this, but it's been a really long time. Yeah, I think there's going to be a time jump, but I'm not sure how long of a time jump, because I would love to see a little bit of them right afterwards, like finding some of their other characters that they lost, because I think Prince Robot, his body is on the island, right? Or
Yeah.
on the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to see a scene where they find him. But I do think that it's probably going to be in the future. I think at least a couple of years, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at, based on the image, I would basically say to myself that Hazel is on that cover. I think she might be in her preteen. So this might be, hey, for all we know, this could be a 2.5 to a 3.5 year time jump.
Right. Yeah. I think she'll probably be, if I had to speculate, I'd say she's probably going to be around Sophie's age right now in the comics, for volume 9. So she'd be 11, 12, maybe.
So you're going to be reading the floppy issues?
Yes.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, I am going to be. I mean, like, I will definitely say the most positive thing, and this is not just a Saga thing. This is an Image thing. I truly appreciate the fact that they are keeping the price per issue at $2.99. I'm glad that they're sticking with the old price tag. They're not going to jack up the price and make it a special $5.99 issue like a lot of comic book companies do when it comes to a big issue coming out and then they take the price back down. No, Image, especially with some of their most loyal titles, they know that, again, I think they have the fans in mind. They want the fans to keep reading. So now that they're going back to buying the floppies, let's just make sure that the price is affordable for them to continue to buy these floppies. I mean, I'm going to patiently wait for the volumes to come out just because of the fact that I am a certain kind of collector, and my attitude is, you've already started collecting a certain story in one way, don't change it up. And also, considering the fact that I feel that one of the few things that Saga has that all comic books really try to achieve, that's rereadability. There's an amazing story here. I would reread this again, and rereading floppies all the time, especially ones that are just so valuable. You don't want to wear your comics out. That's one of the few things that I do know. But I definitely will be picking up volume 10 when it comes out. I even actually reached out to my local comic book store this evening, because I always do, just to make sure that I have confirmed things on my polls. And I told him, please make sure that an issue of Saga 55 is ready for me, but I'm not going to get any more. But I said, if you put trade paperbacks on people's pull lists, please put volume 10 on mine, so when it comes out, I'll pick it up. So I will probably be relying on you to let me know how it's going.
Yeah, I've reread the series quite a few times now. It's a little embarrassing, but um but I always read through the volumes. I never read through the issues again, just because I don't want to, like you said, I don't want to wear them out. But I have been in this for a long time with this comic, so I don't think I could wait for volume 10 to come out on its own. I think I would definitely have to just get the next issue. So I'm really excited about it. I'm nervous.
I don't think you should be nervous. I just feel that, I mean, like, if they literally go in a downward spiral after everything that they've done in 54 issues, I think that would be an embarrassment for comic book creation everywhere. I mean, what I would really like to know, because right now, one of the biggest trends in entertainment is comic books in regards to their value right now. It depends on whether or not a streaming service has picked up your rights and plans to make a show out of this. I mean, I would be perfectly frank if I said I am wondering if anyone wanted to turn this into like a show for Netflix or HBO Max or Amazon Prime. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know how it would be done. I would definitely say I know who should definitely be directing and producing it, because when I take a look at these worlds, the only person that I feel that can do this correctly is Luc Besson, who directed The Fifth Element and Valerian, the City of a Thousand Planets. He's the only person that I know in the world of film that has created worlds just as wacky as this one. He's an awesome director, and everything that he has directed in worlds of science fiction and fantasy, they're just so outrageous and outlandish that I'm like, Luc Besson, that's your Saga television show creator, everybody. If you disagree, you let me know, but I just feel he's the one that can do it perfectly. He'll be true to the story, and he'll be true to the creators, and he'll just nail it. That's just my personal opinion.
Maybe it's unpopular, I don't know, but I'm not sure if I would want to see this on a movie or TV show. Just there's a lot of things that I don't think would translate well to like CGI, I guess, or special effects, if it was like live action. I'm just not sure how it would transpose, and I'm not sure if I would want to see them. Specifically, like I guess like the salamanders and the monsters that all come about and stuff. I don't know. I'm just very picky about that stuff. But
I
on
agree.
the other hand, animated would be very weird. I think I'm not sure. I don't know of a series that is really like this right now in animation. Um, I'm not sure like art style wise and stuff like where it would go. So I feel like maybe it should just be a comic.
Hey, if that's the way it is. I mean, look, I wouldn't be upset about that. I was just basically telling people because that's just the mentality of a lot of people these days. It's like, when is the TV show coming out? When is the movie coming out? Because there was a comic book that just came out last year that was co-written by Keanu Reeves, and like Netflix already picked up the movie rights even before the first issue came out. So because of the fact that Keanu Reeves was co-writing the book, and the fact that the movie rights had the TV rights had already been sold to Netflix, the minute issue number 1 came out, everybody bought it.
Right.
So
But I wouldn't be surprised if this did eventually get picked up by someone, just because Brian K. Vaughan also wrote Why the Last Man Standing, and that is becoming a TV show.
yeah, you might not know this, but it's already been canceled.
It has been canceled. I thought it was
Yeah,
just. I didn't know.
it was big news. It came. I don't even know if when it even, or if it even aired, but people already heard that it already got canceled. I don't know if it was because the show was good or bad. I think it was because there was just so much controversy around it that people they basically just said, okay, I don't want to deal with all this crap. Let me just cut my losses.
Well, I do think Why the Last Man would have been a good TV show. I think it would have been similar to Walking Dead, kind of. So I wish we got to see that. I'm sad it got canceled. I didn't know that, but I think, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Saga got picked up, just especially because of the popularity of it, and with it coming back, I think that it could rejuvenate some interest in the publishing world and movie world and whatever. Uh, but we'll see.
Well, I actually now can tell you why this whole thing happened. So, the series of Why the Last Man premiered on September 13th, 2021 on FX and on Hulu. And in October 2021, the series was canceled. And apparently, it had nothing to do with controversy. It's just the fact that FX did not want to extend the cast's contract by $3 million.
Is it still on Hulu? I'll watch it.
Apparently, that's where it is, so it's already aired. So,
I didn't hear anyone talk about it airing.
yeah, I remembered where the comic book community and even the booktube community was talking about the fact that like everybody was excited, and then they said, well, sorry to burst your bubble, but that show's already been canceled. But yeah, the first season and only season is already airing, and it's out there now.
Wow, I will definitely have to check that out.
Yeah. So I think you and I can definitely agree upon the fact that Saga is definitely a must-be read. I think that as long as you are okay with very adult content in your comics, just understand that pay it no mind. It's there, but there's an excellent story in the pages of these books. And I am really excited to see where this story goes, because I cannot recall a series that grabbed me so quickly and really got me to invest in it so quickly like Saga. So all those people on BookTube that have been hyping up this comic book for years, look, the hype was real. You got me.
Yeah, it's definitely an addictive series, and I would like you said, I would look up also trigger warnings, because not only does this have a lot of graphic violence and nudity, but also there's a lot of different subject matter that's played in this, like drug addiction and miscarriages and stuff. So I would definitely just look up a full list on that, because there's so much that it covers in the series that I would just be wary of that if you are new to Saga.
Christa, I'm just going to say that this was an excellent discussion. I'm glad that we got this one off the ground. And all that I'm going to say to you is that I hope that you are going to get everything that you want from the second half of this incredible comic story. And I am hoping that if there will be time, you will be able to come back for some more discussions, because I think that we will be discussing each of the volumes as they come out.
I will always be around for Saga.
All right.
I'm a huge fan.
All right. Well, like I said, I'm hoping that the next time April will be able to join us as well. Maybe we'll find some more Saga fans that want to join us as well. Right now, I know that there are a lot of channels out there that are talking about Saga and doing some group reads, because everybody is excited for magical date. That is January 26th, 2022. Issue number 55 of Saga by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. If you are a fan or just want to get started again, don't forget to go to your local comic store and pick it up. And thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.